Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is Christmas Eve, December 24th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining me to discover the truth beneath the surface. Hopefully, you folks are having a wonderful, wonderful Christmas Eve. And regardless of whatever we think about Christmas, whatever we learn about Christmas, as I've been saying lately, in my view, it's still about the holiday season. In our hearts, we know what we're celebrating, even though we're not really celebrating it on the right date and under the right circumstances. And I'm sure all that's going to get ironed out as we progress into the Great Awakening and we learn about our true history and we learn about religion and so forth. But all that is yet to come. And right now, I think it's important for all of us to remember what's really important about this holiday, what we're really celebrating. And even for those of you out there who are not Christians, we're brought together really in the spirit of God. And regardless of how you seek God, regardless of which religion, which spiritual viewpoint you have, as far as I'm concerned, like I've said in the past, if you're a good human being and you have goodwill and you hate evil in the same way that I do, but you don't have any hatred in your heart for people, and you love humanity, well, as far as I'm concerned, this is a big tent. You're welcome under it. And I think we need to come together and to unify. So thank you for joining me today. I really do appreciate everybody taking the time to listen, as always. So I'm driving around with my coffee here. And, typically I don't do this until Saturday. And it's a holiday. So obviously it's a little bit different. And there is some snow on the ground this morning, which is kind of nice. Always nice to see a little bit of snow, white Christmas. Don't see that too often, even in the area that I'm from. Of course, it snows a lot, but it never really snows on Christmas when you want it to, when you're stuck in your house. So, speaking of being stuck in your house, I was talking last night about, I was doing my situation update. I was talking about the theory that's been floating around, and a lot of folks out there are really kind of holding their breath and crossing their fingers and toes that we might see some major, major action today and tomorrow. Especially tomorrow. All right. Now, most folks are, a lot of people do work at least half a day on Christmas Eve, but if you look around the globe, serious amount of people are going to be in their home. I mean, I don't know if you've ever driven around on Christmas. Most of the time, I'm just pretty much inside all day. But if you've ever driven around on Christmas, I mean, it is an absolute ghost town. Everywhere you go, everything's closed. Everybody's home with their families and so forth. So there's a lot of speculation that this would be an absolutely brilliant time to trigger the EBS or to make some sort of a major move while everybody is at home. First of all, they're out of the way. So anything that needs to be done, on the ground by the military, you got people out of the way. It's a perfect opportunity, number one. And then when you think about the shock and the impact of everything that's going to transpire, people are going to need all the help and all the support that they can get. Every support system that's available to them, they're going to be calling upon. And Christmas is probably the one time a year where most people go home or they surround themselves with their support system. People travel, they go all across the country, all across the world to reconnect with their loved ones, to be around the people that they love and cherish the most. So when you think about it, don't you think that the White Hats would consider the possibility that this would be an ideal time to do this, to shock the world at a time when the world had really paused for a moment anyway and had gathered with their loved ones and their family? It could be an absolutely amazing, brilliant stroke of genius move if they do this. Now, we're obviously talking about speculation here. And depending upon the day, sometimes I get really into the speculation, and then other days I just sort of kind of wash my hands of it and say, you know what, in terms of the timing, I'm always speculating, but in terms of the timing, most days I kind of just tend to ignore it, or at least try to. But in this situation, I have to tell you, given everything that I've been learning about Christmas, because I guess if before I knew some of the real truths about Christmas, my assumption would have been that the White Hats would not want to interrupt people's family holiday, would want to give people this opportunity to, have a great time with their family. I mean, of course, in theory anyway, but, to come together with their loved ones, to exchange gifts, to take a break from work and from life and so forth, that they would want to just leave that alone. Right. I never considered Christmas as a possibility when I was thinking about, trying to project into the future. When are they going to do this? And so I thought that this, I never really imagined that it would be something to consider. But now, given all the things that I've learned about Christmas, and I'm really in the process of getting red pilled, as I've continually said, on this topic, quite frankly, I'm learning more and more. It seems to me like it would make sense, and that it would be a really an amazing move on the part of the White Hats to use what really is a satanic holiday, that has roots that go all the way back, that I've explained, going back into ancient Rome. They and what they did was they just co-opted or rebranded one of their satanic holidays, and over time, and generations pass, and with every generation that passes, more time that passes, less and less people know the true history. And of course, technology advanced, and mind control and all of the apparatus that they used against us advanced to the point where people just completely were disconnected from the true history. And thank God there were some folks out there who held on to that history and that truth. But by and large, we all forgot, or we never even knew. And so we're all getting red pilled on this topic. So I don't think that I'm not looking at it in the same way that the White Hats wouldn't want to disturb us celebrating Jesus's birthday. But what if it turns out we're not really celebrating Jesus's birthday? And that's part of the whole red pilling that needs to happen. So we'll have to see. But I'll tell you, I mean, there's been a lot of buzz, there's been a lot of chatter. And we know that the military buildups are continuing. I mean, we're seeing more and more evidence that this devolution is going to come to its climax, like I talked about, with this, I believe, what's going to look like simulated World War III or IV, depending upon, some people classify World War III as the Cold War. I mean, regardless, I mean, it's going to look like the entire world is at war. And I believe that this is all going to happen very, very soon. That's what it appears. I don't think it's going to be months, because the troops are, Russian troops, from what I understand, are advancing as we speak to the Ukrainian border. The situation between China and Taiwan is continuing to intensify. You've got the situation now, Israel and Iran going back and forth. I mentioned this last night, that Iran, from what I understand, all of their nuclear capabilities have been taken out behind the scenes, and what's being played out right now is for the public. Essentially, is Israel is saying, well, we can take out Iran's nuclear facilities at any moment. So I think that this is all going to kick off. Now, how is it going to? Who's going to be the first? Who's going to throw the first punch in this simulated event? Because that's really what this is. I mean, what we're talking about, and more people, I think, are starting to refer to what's happening, or what's going to happen, as the event. 107 refers to it that way. There are a lot of folks out there who are really using that term more and more and more. And whether or not it's on purpose to get people to think in terms of events and not dates, that could be. But I think there is a planned event that is going to be that moment. That's that crossing the Delaware moment, where it really does make the fight come out into the open, and it's going to make everybody aware of what's happening, the direction that we're going. that marker that I've been talking about, that Q referred to, that's going to clarify, it's going to make clear our future direction. I'm sure I probably got the wording wrong on that. It's going to verify that action is being taken, that justice is being served. I mean, that's exactly, how many times have you heard me throw that word around on my show and talk about, why it's such a significant word and how much force it has behind it, that justice that has been completely vacant, completely absent in our society, in our world, by and large, for such a long time. And how long can human beings who are naturally virtuous, good people, how long can we exist in a world where there's no justice? How long before it does permanent damage to our psyche, to our spirit, to our soul? How much of that can we endure? And that's really the question that we've been living through this entire time. Really, the entire time we've been alive. I can't recall, when I look back at my entire life, seeing any justice on a grand scale. Heck, you're lucky if you even get it on a small scale. Seems like all you get is injustice everywhere you look. And sure, you got the media there to spin things, to try to convince everyone and gaslight everyone into thinking that we have this just, virtuous society when it's convenient for them, obviously, when they're pushing a certain narrative. And then, of course, when they're pushing a different narrative, we're, horrible and terrible and rotten and we need to be burned down. They don't have any code, really. The only thing that they care about is their agenda, advancing their agenda and using every situation, whether it's a false flag or whether it's an organic situation, seizing control of the narrative and trying to use it to their advantage. That's all they care about. It's not about true or false. It's about division. It's about throwing us off the trail. It's about getting us to focus on anything but them. And I know I've talked about this so many times, but it bears repeating, because until this paradigm has burst into the open and until the public becomes conscious of it, well, we need to keep discussing it. We need to keep beating that drum so people understand how the enemy operates. But this season that we're in is just absolutely incredible to be living through. And with every passing day, whether it's, today's Christmas Eve, tomorrow's Christmas, or, whether we see the beginning of this, the beginning of this climactic storm, or whether, like every other date that's come and gone, whether it's going to just simply do that and we're just going to be pretty much status quo where we are right now, and getting our expectations up and everything else. That's why I try not to do that. I have to tell you that it's almost impossible for me to not get my expectations up because of how passionately I want to see resolution, just like all of you. I am human, so it's almost impossible for me to not get disappointed when I kind of grasp onto a certain idea. And right now, of course, the idea is what I discussed. Are we going to see, is Christmas going to be the day? And I'm a little bit excited about it. I talked about yesterday. It's just, there's something about my spidey senses, or however you want to think about it, my intuition. There's just something there that just, I don't know. It seems a little bit different this time, and maybe it has to do with all of the chatter that I've been hearing recently that the kickoff is really, really, really close. We've been hearing that for a while, but it's really there's been an uptick the closer we get to the end of this year. And to be honest with you, with Christmas coming up until recently, I almost kind of resigned myself to thinking that, we probably are not going to see anything until next year. And this probably is going to drag into 2022 in terms of waiting for the big event. We know this is going to drag into 2022 regardless, and it would have, even if the big event had happened back in the summertime. It's the beginning of the next phase of the Great Awakening. And that's where we are. And everybody can feel it right now. People who are awake right now, we all understand and can feel that we're getting to the end of the beginning. And we're about to enter into a new phase, and it's just a simple matter of time in terms of waiting for that big event to finally happen. And it's exciting, I have to tell you. I mean, yes, I have certain anxieties, regarding how this is all going to play out, because I've war gamed it in my mind 6 ways from Sunday. And there are a lot of scenarios that I think are going to unfold for all of us personally. And I think collectively as well. But personally, I think there are going to be a lot of scenarios that unfold that are going to be very painful. Because let's not forget, when I sit here and I talk about how people are going to react to this, and how the general public, how certain people just aren't going to be able to handle it. A lot of people are going to commit suicide. A lot of people are just going to just lose it, and whatever that means for them. But they're not going to be able to get to the other side of it. That includes people that I know. That includes people that I love and that I care about. I mean, I pray to God that I'm wrong, and that they're able to get up to speed, and they're able to work their way through it. But I mean, come on. There's a real big possibility that they're not going to be able to. But I'll tell you. So there is that fear, that anxiety. I think it's just a natural part of going through this process. And I talk about fear a lot. I've been talking about fear of consequences specifically a lot, because I think it's so important to continually hear that message and to spread that message everywhere, that the fear of the consequences is ultimately what is preventing the Great Awakening from progressing faster. Now, it is inevitable. Nothing can stop what's coming. Everybody is ultimately, I think, going to get up to speed. Everyone who's meant to ascend. There are going to be a lot of folks who aren't going to make it. I mean, heck, there already are. I mean, just yesterday I mentioned, 1 million people in the United States, nearly 1 million people as of like 2 weeks ago. So we're well over 1 million people that have perished as a result of this thing that goes in your arm. And so as this progresses, we're going to lose more and more people, unfortunately. But those people who are meant to ascend, those people who are going to get up to speed, ultimately, we are going to be the ones who are going to be the torch bearers, the light bearers that illuminate the beginning of this new era. And the first thing that we're going to do, the first function that we're going to have, whether it be on a large scale, if you're somebody like President Trump or any one of these, supposedly dead celebrities who I believe are going to come out and reemerge, and they're going to help the country heal. Now, whether it's on that scale or whether it's just, you're an ordinary person, just like myself, and you're going to simply be of service to your fellows around you, regardless of the scenario, you still, the same is true. You still are the light bearer. We are the ones who are the pioneers of this new era. And I don't think that is anything to be taken lightly. And I think it's also important because at a time when so many of us are feeling tired and worn down and battle fatigued, we have to remember how important we are. We have to remember how important our role is. So often we focus on the white hats and when they're going to make their moves and how the military is going to function in this entire process, as we should, because we understand that in order for real change to happen, that part of the plan needs to be executed. But we can't lose sight of how important our role is in this entire process, how vitally important we are, because the military could step in. And I've talked about this many times, that the military could have stepped in at any point. I mean, they could have stepped in before Donald Trump even came along. There could have been a civil war. There could have been a whole bunch of scenarios that could have unfolded. But the reality of the matter is, I do believe that God is the ultimate authority, and he's calling the shots. And God did not want that scenario to unfold that way, because he needed the people to go through a process of healing, a process of revelation, a process of healing, a process of growth in terms of this, I think, probably primarily their spiritual growth, but to go through a process of strengthening and healing their DNA. All of this had to happen, I believe, the exact way that it did for the people, for us to be able to assume our vital role in this process. Because again, the military could have stepped in any moment and they could save us. And there are a lot of people out there who are just saying, yes, absolutely, do it. And look, I'm right there with you folks. But they could come right in and they could save all of us. But if we haven't gotten to a point where we have ascended beyond the third dimension on our own without somebody coming in and basically just swooping in and saving the day, if we're not a part of that process, if we're not spearheading that charge, and I mean, in our role as digital soldiers, in a nonviolent sense, the military is doing all of the kinetic fighting. There is fighting going on. There's no question about that. But our role is absolutely vitally important because we are going to be the ones who piece everything back together once all of this information comes out. Once the military, once the White Hats finally play the trump card and this whole thing kicks off, it's going to be our responsibility to hold society together. In a spiritual sense, we are going to be the ones, we're going to be the new leaders who emerge because we're going to be the only ones who understand what's happening at first. I mean, everybody is going to be absolutely terrified. They're not going to know what hit them. And we are going to understand what's unfolding. We're going to be the ones who are going to be pushed into that leadership role, like I've talked about. But we weren't ready for it. We weren't ready for it until we went through this entire process on our own. I think, the last year or so, like I've talked about a lot lately, it's been really I think it's just what I've been seeing is the end of one phase, the beginning of another. And that cycle repeating over and over and over again. And for me, what this last year brought was the end of the individual, lonely, alienated, isolated path that I had traveled, being a person who was committed to the truth, being a person who was loyal ultimately to God and understood that God was in my heart and God was prompting me in a certain direction. When I finally reached the end of that rope and I finally realized the futility of trying to do anything other than what was in my heart, that ended one phase for me. A phase of my life was over, and when I finally decided to take the leap and to do this. And I think for all of us, based upon the stories that I've heard from my audience and people that I've talked to, I think a lot of people have had similar experiences this past year where their individual path, for one reason or another, has essentially, well, it's still there, but it's really kind of faded into the background, and their path has merged with all of ours. And we're now walking together. And I've talked about how I also believe that was a part of the plan for God to bring his people together and to have certain people tasked with that responsibility. And I believe that I was tasked with that responsibility along with many others out there who have a voice, who have an ability to bring people together. And like I've said, it's the greatest honor of my life. I never imagined that God would see fit to put somebody like me, in terms of the way I thought about myself for a great portion of my life. I never imagined somebody like me, you want me to do this? And the enormity of, that responsibility and that role and how many people continually remind me of it. And I believe, it's not just, people reminding me of it for no reason. I believe, as I've said many times, that God works through people. And he sends messages and delivers messages through people at exactly the right time, with precision timing. And I know you've all experienced this in your life as well. But it's no accident that we've connected with one another, that we've come together. And I believe that, something really, really special is happening all over the world. But specifically, I have to admit I am a little bit biased because it is my show and my audience. But I have to say, what I've witnessed with this audience and the people in this audience and the way that something magical seems to be happening, it can't be by accident. And I believe that God had always intended for us to find one another. So that as we go through this, the eye of the storm, as we're, threading the needle here, and it's getting to the point, where we're not quite there yet, but, for a lot of people, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but, collectively, could probably say we're not quite there yet to the point where we're really hanging on by our fingernails, but we're awfully close to that point. I think we're, one or two chess moves away from that real precipice of destruction, like, what we've been talking about all along, what was necessary for us to get to. I mean, I think that it's quite clear at this point in time that when you look at all the real statistics and you look at all the real surveys that they've done and all the, the numbers, they don't lie. They paint a very clear picture that the people, not just here in the United States, but all over the world, to varying degrees, of course, but the people, a majority of them are awake. People understand, they get it. And unfortunately, there are a lot of us who, but by the way, I mean, that's not to minimize the amount of people who don't get it. I mean, I think we have a vast majority at this point, but let's be honest, there's still a massive portion of the population. Even if it was 20%, I mean, even if we've hit that number, and I believe, 80%, a lot of folks are saying that, we're there or we're pretty close to it. But I mean, even if it's 20% of the people, that's still quite a few people out there who are completely brainwashed or zombies. I mean, and that's still something to contend with. But I think that it's pretty clear when you look at all the statistics that 3 out of 4 people don't trust the mainstream media. I mean, I haven't even looked at the latest ones about, in terms of the, Biden's approval ratings, Kamala Harris's approval ratings, just the overall lack of trust in the system. Every single time they come out with numbers, I mean, the mainstream media's own surveys, I mean, again, this is all part of the pantomime, I believe, because I'm more and more convinced now that the white hats are in control of the mainstream media, pretty much fully now. I think that, like I always say, that there's good and bad everywhere, and there certainly could be rogue elements still operating and working for evil. But I think that most of what is on mainstream media at this point is being scripted and probably has been for quite some time. And it just took a while for me to become fully convinced that was what was going on. Because, as I've said, I mean, to me, the evidence of that is just how outrageous things are getting. And, up to a certain point, I can understand the argument. Well, the cabal is just getting more and more desperate and they're just acting out and flailing around everywhere. I think that's true up to a certain point. But I think some of the things that we've seen and the things that we repeatedly see coming out of the mainstream media and how they attempt to spin the Biden administration and how they can't even make Biden look good. They can't even minimize how insane he is, how he can't even string a sentence together, how their analysis, what they're putting out there for public consumption gets more and more outrageous every single day. To me, that just can't be organic. I believe that the white hats are behind that 100%. And they're doing everything that they can in these final days before they make their big move, before this event is triggered. What the trigger is going to be, I wish I could tell you. But to wake up, or to at least initiate the process of awakening, to prime the engines, to prime the pumps in as many people's minds as they can before this thing kicks off. Because it's going to be crazy. I mean, it's going to be absolutely insane. Now, all of us, we're going to understand that what we're witnessing has all been planned for quite some time. And yes, I think there's going to be a part of us that's still going to be, it's going to seem very, very real because I think there is going to be, some kinetic activity going on, but it's not going to be what it looks like. It's not going to be what the mainstream media is reporting, if the mainstream media is even operating at that point in time when this simulation goes down. But it's definitely going to go down. And there's, I don't think that there's any possible way that they could implement worldwide global change, coordinated worldwide global change, without having some sort of a simulated worldwide military conflict in order to usher it all in. And of course, there's also all of these satanic sites that need to get hit. And, everyone's talking about the rods of God, hitting, I can't remember, I think it was 30 something targets that have been identified all over the world. And that's probably, that's just a number. I mean, there could be, many, many more. I mean, I've seen, listening to Gene's decodes on all of these different sites all over the world. I mean, he's done decodes where there have been 30, 40, 50 sites just in one single area. But in terms of all of the major sites that really need to go down, I mean, there's been an awful lot of talk about the rods of God, using the rods of God during this simulated military event. And I think it's a real possibility. And there have been an awful lot of explosions. I talked about this yesterday in and around Switzerland. And anyone who knows anything, has been paying attention about Switzerland and CERN and CIA headquarters, they understand the significance of that. That this could be a major area of cabal leadership holdouts, still fighting to the bitter end. But of course, there's also reports coming out of Antarctica that there have been major surrenders of cabal leaders as well. So as always, there's kind of both sides of the coin. There's reports that kind of lead us to believe that the fighting is over and the surrender has happened. And then there are other reports that seem to indicate the opposite. And, as always, we're coming together and trying to put the puzzle pieces together. But I believe that the ending of this movie was going to be absolutely magnificent. But you have to go through that point. It's just like, when you're watching a movie, you imagine, you can sense when the climax is coming because you understand the events are all leading up to that, that battle scene, let's just say, for example. And you even know, because you're in a movie and you've suspended your disbelief or whatever, but you already know that the ending is going to be satisfying. You're going to have the good guys prevail in the end, but you still have to go through that crucible, that final battle scene, and all of the anxiety and all of the, the tension, the nerves building up to that major event. And then, of course, the event itself, once the fight actually kicks off. You have to go through that to get to the other side. And I think that, it's almost like, I feel like we've approached kind of the top of the roller coaster. We've escalated all the way to the top, and we're teetering right at that edge. And it's just going to be, even a strong gust of wind to come by to, push us over that edge. And I think that's, to me, that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like where we are right now on an energetic level. And what are going to be the media tactics? How are they going to try to respond to this big event is also going to be something that's fascinating to see. Now, I think, again, that the media is in control of the White Hats. So a lot of this, I think, could be scripted as well, at least in the initial phases. In fact, one of the things that really fascinates me is how we're going to go, how are we going to transition out of the pantomime and into actual reality, because that's very, very important. And all of us understand when you're fighting an asymmetric war, a psychological war, there has to be deception, there has to be fog of war. But in the aftermath of that fog needs to be cleared up, and people, and especially in this conflict, it's really an existential conflict between good and evil, truth and deception. The truth needs to be revealed to all of us. I'm actually curious. I would love to ask, Wano Savin, for example, or I would love to ask Gene. Maybe I will. It's, the next time I have a chance to interview him. If it were you who was in charge of grabbing that microphone and really being the one to give that initial message to the American people or people all over the world, depending on how this goes down, what would you say? What's going to be the initial message to everybody? That would be, I think, an interesting question. And then, ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, like I say, how are we going to transition from living in this world of inversion and deception to actual truth and reality? Because so much of this justice that we believe has been meted out behind the scenes has been done, cloak and dagger. It's been done covertly. This war has been fought covertly. We understand that, but there comes a point where all of us, not only do we crave justice, but we also need transparency. I mean, I think if we're ever going to piece our society back together, we need truth, we need honesty, we need transparency. We need to know and not have things hidden from us. There are some people who are really fundamentalists about that and believe that, every single thing needs to be revealed. And I have to tell you, I'm with those people. Now, do I think that it needs to be artfully done? Yes, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that I think that anything should be kept underneath the table. Everything needs to be revealed. Everything needs to be laid out if we're going to piece our society back together. And I believe that that will happen, but because there's so much, the fog of war is so thick, and where we are right now, it's impossible to know anything, to determine any reality one way or another in terms of what's happening in this war. We're so far away from that transparency and honesty. I wonder repeatedly how we're going to get to that point and reestablish some sort of faith in our ability to govern ourselves, to believe in our leaders, because we've been kept in the dark for such a long time. And I think people are, that's a huge part of what we're feeling. We're feeling that darkness just weighing on us. And yes, it's the darkness of evil that's being exposed by the light, but it's also the darkness of living in constant state of deception. And what that does, it's we all understand, those of us who pay attention to energy and frequency, and we study the ascension process and we're getting educated, we understand how important it is to try to resonate at a high frequency and to try to not live in this constant state of worry and anxiety and fear. We strive to do that. And yet at the same time, the forces that are really inflicting that upon us, that those constant, that fear and anxiety and the circumstances around us, this constant state of deception is feeding into that low vibrational frequency. So it's very, very hard, because this war is being fought. When wars are being fought, I can't imagine that being at a high vibrational frequency. And war is war. And so I think it's very, very difficult for us to maintain that high vibrational frequency when we're really living through an unprecedented amount of deception. I mean, the world as we know it is a complete lie. And so it's like, and we understand that. We know that as patriots, we know it. But that doesn't change the fact that we're saddled with this as our reality because, well, the matrix hasn't been dismantled yet. And by the way, I really want to see that movie. And for those of you out there who have seen The Matrix, it just came out, I think it was just a couple of days ago. There probably aren't, well, there may be a lot of folks out there, but probably not many yet. But if you've seen the movie, I would love to, let me know in the comments and let me know what you thought of it, because I'm hearing some very interesting things about it. Some people, of course, there's always critics, and some people say that they didn't enjoy it, but the movie itself, I think, is the timing of its release, especially if we see some major event on or around Christmas, is huge, and I don't think is an accident. And this movie, when I remember when I first saw The Matrix, I think it came out way back in 1999 or something like that. And when I first saw this movie, I never, in my wildest dreams, did I imagine that this movie. First of all, I had a difficult time even understanding the concept when I first saw it. I remember, because at that point, I was pretty young. I was only, I don't know, my early 20s or something like that. So I didn't really have any instinct, and this was also before 9/11 even happened. So I didn't really have any interest or instinct in terms of paying attention to politics and in the world and anything like that. So I just looked at it as a pure fictional movie. And a movie that, quite frankly, I had a difficult time at first conceptually wrapping my brain around. I didn't even know what it meant. I mean, boy, oh boy, given all that I've learned, I mean, you fast forward 20 something years, 22 years. And now I understand the Matrix as being really a documentary in essence. And what we're living through, the simulation that we call reality, is exactly that. It's a computer program. And the Matrix is really showing us what they've done to humanity, how they farmed all of us. And when I do see this movie, I'm actually going to go back. Probably, I thought about this. My main issue at this point is time, is trying to juggle everything in my schedule, because as folks know, I mean, I work full time, and I do, at least for the time being anyway, as long as they'll let me work there, depending on the circumstances. But I do work full time, and then I do these podcasts when I have time. So but I was thinking to myself, if I have the time, I want to go back really and rewatch the Matrix trilogy. Before I see this new one, if I have the time to do it and really do an in-depth analysis of the Matrix and how it plays into the red pilling process. I mean, that was the movie that introduced the term red pill and blue pill. So, and going back that far, I mean, I do believe that the white hats have been red pilling us using, really, I think the Matrix is one of the primary examples of the beginning of that process to wake everybody up, because they knew and they understood where we were headed. And at that point in time, if you were like me, you were what 107 describes, the kid by the side of the road, just watching all of these events happen, unfold, not having any idea that it was all moving in a direction that was going to be of such significance that one couldn't even possibly overstate it. And that we were going to be a part of that. And here I am, just going blissfully along, in my ignorance. Well, I shouldn't say blissfully. Unfortunately, I experienced ignorance in my life, but it wasn't that blissful in my case. I've talked about, not in detail necessarily, but I've talked about my background. My life has been very, very tumultuous. There's been very few times in my life where I really could say that I've known peace. And most of the time, life has felt like a struggle. Life has felt like a battle. For a lot of reasons, I think, that are universal amongst all of us, because we're trapped in this matrix, but also, things that happened to me specifically that made it all the more difficult. But I sit back and I reflect on, what this great awakening means to me on a personal level. And I could sit here and I could talk about the significance of it on a global scale, and I do. I mean, I could talk about that all day long. But on a personal level, for me, what it represents on the other side of this storm, what it represents to me is peace. Is finally reaching that point where I could feel like I was at peace within myself. Because over the years, I've come to terms with myself the way all of us do as we grow and we mature into ourselves, and we accept certain things about ourselves. We accept who we are. Doesn't necessarily mean we love everything about ourselves, but we embrace who we are, because eventually, as you mature and you grow, you realize that you might as well accept yourself and do the best thing you can to better yourself and to be the best that you can be, because like they say, be yourself because everybody else is taken. It's a fool's errand to try to be anyone else. So we've embraced who we are. But I, even having gone through that and coming to terms with who I am for the most part, I still felt that gnawing inside of me, and will continue to feel that gnawing inside of me, that prevents me from ever really having any peace in this world, because I understand that I'm in a matrix. I understand that I'm in a false reality. I understand that evil, well, I don't believe they're in control anymore, but evil has been in control this entire time. I see it the same way you do, and you can't unsee it. And when you can't unsee it, you can't remove it from your consciousness. You can never go back. That blue pill. I mean, once you've taken that red pill, the blue pill doesn't work anymore. You could be teetering on the edge, and you can make that decision. And I think a lot of people are right there right now. That's why the matrix is so significant and so timely. because so many people right there, all around the world, like Juan talked about when he did his commentary on it, we're all Neo in some way. I mean, all of us, we've already chosen. We were Neo a long time ago. We chose the red pill. That's said and done. But all around the world, of course, as the energy shifts, as the earth ascends, and as we enter into this crucible, this meat grinder, all around the world, people are Neo. They're having to choose red or blue, and they're starting to understand what that choice means, what it really represents. And that movie, I think, is going to be huge in terms of red pilling folks and helping them understand and make sense of all the realities that are going to come out as they discard perception, as their perception is ripped away cruelly. It needs to be. They're going to be completely in the dark, groping around everywhere, looking for the light, looking for reality, looking for truth. And again, that's where we come in. And we're going to function in that role. And it's a godly responsibility. It's an amazing time to be alive. All right, folks, hopefully you enjoyed this coffee chat. I'm going to leave you here. I got some stuff I got to do, of course, it being Christmas Eve. So I don't know if I'll be back tomorrow on Christmas. It really kind of depends on how the day goes. I would love to be able to do a Christmas episode, but if I can't make it back on tomorrow, I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, a wonderful time with your family, even though they'll probably drive you crazy if they're like mine. But regardless, spend that time with your loved ones. And, who knows, folks, maybe the next time we talk, we could be dealing with a very, very different situation, and that perception could have been ripped away in the time that, it took for us to meet again. I hope and pray to God that that's the case. But if it's not, regardless of what happens in and around Christmas, we're going to soldier on. We're going to see this thing through to the end. And all of you are committed just as I am. All right, everyone. I love each and every one of you. God bless and Godspeed. Please let me know in the comments what you thought of today's episode. I'll be back soon. Patriot out.